All right, ladies and gentlemen, a hard slam into the show. Here we go. Dave Costa, Renegade Aviator, and I have got a pilot extraordinaire as our guest today. This is air racing, past, present, and future. I've got somebody, been there, done that. He's flown a lot of different airplanes, done a whole lot of different things, does more in a day than I can ever imagine doing with aviation. And it's a name that everybody's going to recognize. Mr. Skip Holm, 5-time gold winner at the air races. Skip, welcome to air racing, past, present, future. How you doing, sir?
Yeah, pretty good.
Outstanding. There's a bit of a. I'm glad to have you.
You know,
ladies and you know. That's the best thing, right? Being alive and above ground is the best thing. Well, I don't need to introduce you too much other than to say, gold winner 1981, 1984, 2000, 2002, 2003, and the Thompson Trophy winner in 2003. And that's just the start of your resume. So since we're talking air racing, thanks for coming on board and give us a little bit about how you got started in air racing. It's a fantastic, cool story.
Well, I was working for Lockheed at the time and sleeping on my boss's couch. And the phone rang, and anyway, he answered the phone. It turned out to be Dave Zuschel, and he had just gotten himself an F-86. And my boss told me, he covered the phone, and he said, if anybody ever asks you how much time you have in an airplane, tell them half your time is in that airplane. And then he hands me the phone. Dave Zuschel on the other line says, how much time you got on an F-86? I said, half my time is in that airplane. And he thinks about that for a while. And he says, where did you get half your time? Where? And I said, over in Thailand, because they had F-86s over there. And the Thailand part is true. The flying, it wasn't. But anyway, Dave Zuschel called me to go fly the 86, and we went out and cranked the puppy up and flew it around. And when we got back, then he says he called me up at the site and asked me if I wanted to fly in Reno, and I said yeah. I said, how many races or how many days do you fly at Reno? And anyway, I ended up taking the airplane up there and on the ramp, and I was the youngest guy with no time in a Mustang except the 20 minutes to ferry it up there. And Phil Barber came over, and he says, and the local reporter, and he says, so how much time do you have in a Mustang? I said 20 some minutes. He says, so are you gonna fly this puppy? And I said, yeah. He said, so how fast you gonna go? And I had no idea how fast I was going to go. And I looked over on the side of the airplane, and I saw 432. And I thought, wow, 432. I could fly a fighter out here with the gear down and the canopy open darn near. Because the gear limit on the 105 was 450 knots. And this is a race that doesn't get over 333. And then I said, well, I'm going to go 450. And he looked at me and said, 450? He said, how do you get that? Where do you get that from? And I said, well, my key at the Hilton. I showed him my key, and it was 450, room number 450. And he said, you're going 450 on a key at the Hilton? I said, yep, that's it. That works. It's recognizing the moment, and then doing it. But anyway, it went for 50.018.
And then you ended up, when you won that Thompson Trophy, you had gone quite a bit quicker as well in the 51 by then. What was your speed then? It was something like, it was over 512, right. I think.
Right.
Very cool.
There was one speed for a lap, and then you were cutting out there a bit, but the Thompson was the average speed and then the highest lap speed. And the highest lap speed was 512 something. And the average is 507. And the beauty about that is that the trophy that goes to the pilot, and it's something that people have been trying to get at for 15, 20 years now. Yeah.
What was that aircraft?
Were we cut out there?
No. You're coming through fine. When you were flying Dago Red, how was that aircraft to fly as an aviator, right? I mean, that aircraft itself. I mean, here you had said you had flown your first P-51 with just jumping in and going, basically, and then you move into a modified aircraft like Dago Red. Was there a major difference in flying those aircraft?
Mm-hmm. Well, when in 1981, Fly the Racer Genie, other people had P-51s, but no one would let me fly their Stalker. And because if you're too much of a risk, you have no time in the airplane, you never did any tail wheel, you never did any big motor, you're not even a prop guy. And so nobody would let me fly the airplane. So the only way I flew Genie was just get in it and taxi out and take off. And the funny part about the takeoff there is I was so used to being in the military and also the way the military treats airplanes that, when I released brakes and added power, I reached on the ramp, and lo and behold, that canopy was so small that I got my head stuck in it. So I was looking 90 degrees to the runway, and the airplane went off by itself. I let go of the stick, and it went off in the grass. And I thought, this in the grass, 20 years ago, going out of Van Nuys. So that was the first takeoff. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I just got Anthony here saying you're the undisputed king of the 500 mile an hour plus club. Well, I've got another question. I got a question for you here, Skip. Here's a question from Chris.
Okay.
Is about Tsunami. What do you think about, was that aircraft going to progress to be the fastest piston powered airplane? What were your thoughts on that?
Well, that if we would not have had JR go and screw with the carburetor in the injection, the airplane would have probably won the year it crashed. And before the Sunday race, I flew the airplane and we headed, at 570 miles an hour at 10,000 feet, which translates out to 410, 450 airplane that's ever raced. Miss Ashley was actually faster, but never raced, except just in a sport category. But Tsunami, there's lots of funny things that happen with that airplane, because when JR called me to fly it, Steve Hinton had just a little airplane out there in Chino, and that was the reason I was going to go fly Tsunami. And the first flight in Tsunami was going to show, so I've been coming down the runway at 10 feet off the ground, and about right in front of everybody, the whole bottom of the airplane explodes, the scoop, and this door and everything flies. I pulled the airplane up, came back around and landed it. And then JR looks at me and he says, "You dumb, you, what is that? Have you ever seen something? What in the, blankety blank were you think you were doing?" He said, "How fast were you going anyway?" And I said, I was going 464. He says, 464 blanket. You're like, what the hell were you doing? And I said, well, JR, I said, you guys told me I could go faster than that. You said it was cleared out to 500, 470 something. And he said, who told you stuff like that? I said, well, you did. He looks at me and says, well, you should never believe a pilot. And I thought that was funny. That was, you know,
here's a question along these lines. Look at this one.
Okay.
Here's a question I want to show you here, Skip. Mr. Awesome. Who's Mr. Awesome? I don't even know who this is. Do you know a Mr. Awesome?
That was a Yak 3. Yeah. Mr. Awesome was a Yak 3 that we took the 700 horse motor off of it and put a 3,700 horse motor on it, you know, thinking that somehow that would be a good combination. And the airplane was so impossible to fly that I took it to Reno and tried it in a few races, and you couldn't see over the motor for one thing. And then it had so much power. And it's just, but it was almost uncontrollable when you put the power in. And we quit flying it in the races and took it back to Van Nuys again. And it eventually crashed the next year, I believe, with Neil Anderson from GD.
What Donna's asking? Do we think could anything have been done? I was just saying. Sorry about that,
Mr. Awesome.
Yeah, could it have been made?
Yeah, to Mr. Awesome, put the canopy on the bottom and sit upside down so you can see where you're going. So looking over the cowling was almost impossible.
That's pretty cool. Very cool. What out of all the airplanes that you've flown, Skip? This is from Bobby. What was your favorite airplane to fly?
Well, there's a few of these, and you know, obviously Dago would be one, and Genie. They're both P-51s. Other than that, I like the ones that are fun would be like the 104 was really a great airplane. You know, just for going out and fooling around with it. You know, a lot of speed. Went fast, flew good, was small. And you know, it was the early F-16 is really what it boiled down to. But when people ask me that question, I always say I would like the airplane that the neighbor has. So if the neighbor has the same airplane as I have, we're going to be spending a lot of time doing, you know, combat, you know, gotcha, and that is easily the most favorite airplane.
I like that. Well, so here's another question from the audience. What was your sketchiest airplane you had to fly? It sounded like Tsunami may have been one.
Yeah, actually, I think Tsunami probably is the one, you know, because it was a totally, you know, made up airplane to go racing, and it actually the last year it really did do what it was designed to do, and it did it at 90 inches or 100 inches, and we had nitrous on the airplane and had a nitrous bottles, you know, tied to the back bottom of the airplane, and then you had to turn the nitrous on every 30 seconds when you're taxiing or when you're flying, when you're doing anything, just to cool the bottles down. Because if you didn't cool the bottles down, the bottles might blow up, and then you cut the airplane in half. But the Tsunami would be a great airplane to write a book on to show all the things that can go wrong with an airplane that's home built, and you're trying to do 500 miles an hour.
Absolutely. Well, Steve's asking a question here about how much he's asking about your 2003 Friday race against Bear. So 2003.
How much throttle? Well, had had so much throttle in it that we had to start measuring it in inches and measuring it in feet. So I tell people in the 2003 race, I could have been, setting the throttle at 3 feet or 2 feet, but we traditionally still use inches. And a lot of people ask that question. I've never told anybody how much power I had on the airplane for the Thompson Trophy. And also, I've never told the story much because, as the owner, you've got to be a pure idiot if you're going to send your airplane out there to do 6 laps when for all the history of trying to get that trophy, you've blown up motors, every single time on 1 lap or 2 lap, not on 6. So, and Tiger can attest to that, and I can attest to that. And we kept going year after year trying to do that 500. And it wasn't that the airplane wasn't capable of doing it; it's that the motor wouldn't stay together, and you could almost get a lap in, and then you blow the motor up. And Tiger was famous for that. But I'm still not going to tell anybody how much power I used on the 2003 race, because and they'll either say, I don't believe you, really, shouldn't have you added more and gone faster, or couldn't even pulled it off. That was the answer I got in 1981 when I was flying Genie. Couldn't you pull the power off a little bit? And I'm not a big one for pulling power off.
That's kind of self-defeating, isn't it, in a race?
yeah. Well,
Well, look, I got a question. You may know this person, Miss Ashley.
yeah, pretty airplane. Huh? Now that airplane, that's the fastest I've ever flown. Prop is in the Miss Ashley.
Oh, really?
Wasn't in a race, but yeah, my kids were in a camp in Medora, North Dakota, and I was bringing the airplane back to Washington, and it was early in the morning. It was that kind of morning we just couldn't resist buzzing somebody, and I happened to know that they were they were doing the Pledge of Allegiance, as the sun is coming up, and I started down toward the flag from about 15,000 feet. By the time I went by the flag, I was 560 indicated, which is really smoking for a prop airplane.
Yeah.
And the airplane was horribly fast. I used to come into like Fargo there, and you'd have to make a turn just to slow the airplane up. I mean, you have to do an extra turn above the traffic pattern. But Gary Levitt's never flew in a race because he crashed it, but it was gorgeous. Yeah.
I'm getting so many questions I can't keep up with them here, so I hate to jump around. But here's another question: flying a zero over Japan?
The one with flying the zero in Japan. Well, the Japanese still are under the agreement after the Second World War that they couldn't fly any of their war machines in their country, and since the zero is one of them, then the question was how do you get the zero to go fly around Japan? And the way this worked, this was not a true zero, not a manufactured in Japan zero. It was manufactured in Russia, and it had an N number, and the airplane was taken apart and put in a container and shipped to Japan. And then when it was all together, I went over there and met the people who were doing the program, and the base, believe it or not, was probably 40, 50 acres, but around the whole thing were people standing. I mean, 10 deep everywhere. I mean, more people than you can imagine. And they all came out to see the Zero. And I taxied the Zero out, and when I started down the taxi, or the takeoff rather, there was no airspeed, and I thought, well, I can't disappoint all these people. Probably don't need an airspeed until I get back to the landing pattern. So, so I kept on going, and I drove around on top of the crowd, and finally came in and landed, and came up, and then walked out to the wingtip. And the Japanese are real conscientious people. I mean, more so than we tend to be. And they didn't like the idea that I would just take a screwdriver and just open up a panel and check and see if the pitot tubes are connected. And then they have somebody come over and blow on the pitot tube to see if it works, and then sign it off. See, and they thought, whoa, this is getting close to, something where you have to disown the idea of the Zero being a Japanese product. But that was a fun time, though.
That's amazing. Well, Skip, you mentioned that you're finishing up a book on the personalities, the racer personalities. Hugely interesting. I think it's going to be a really good seller.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the book and about maybe some of the personalities, the good, the bad, the ugly.
There's 10 different airplanes, and and when you're working for a crew or you're flying with the owner's consent, you get a lot of different kind of attitudes and opinions, and you name it, because every owner is different. And I like the owners that are out to win. And when I looked to fly in Genie in 1981, Wiley turns up in his G2.5 airplane, and came and he came there to see if he was going to allow me to fly the airplane, is really what it was. So as we're sitting there in the conference table, Wiley looks at me and said, so, he's got a Southern boy, so he's got a real Southern drag. He's a little boy like you. What makes you think you can fly? I said, nope, none of that. He said, well, do you have big engine time? And I said, no, don't have any of that. He said, well, you must have that P51 time. And I said, nope, not any of that. And then he just kind of gets up. And then he turns around and he says, yeah, you been in any air races? I said, no, nope. And then he gets up, and I just know he's going over to the phone and dropping that quarter in. He's going to call a real pilot. And then Dave just looks and says, quick, tell him something. And I said, okay, Wiley. He turns around. I said, I did get in a race one time. And he said, what's that? And I said, well, I raced a MiG 20. And he said, oh. And he puts his quarter back in his pocket, walks out the door, and gets into his dome. And that was my checkout in terms of him being the owner. But the book, again, has got stories like that, and usually they're quite funny because of the way people deal with an emergency and stuff like that. I mean, there's another one with Tsunami. The second year I flew Tsunami, went up, and we were going to clear the airplane for 480 miles an hour. So I took a great big hammer and went up and jumped in the airplane and went up to 15,000 feet and rolled it over and put full power on and go smoking toward the ground. And took the hammer and whapped the stick, to clear so the cleared so it won't come apart. Yeah. And what happened is that the airplane fluttered, it blew the connector to the elevator, and then there was no stick for elevation. Only thing worked was the roll control. And so I pulled the power off, and I'm convinced this thing is going to go right into a cornfield. And I'm thinking that if this is my dad's cornfield and he's only one state over from Minnesota there, that people would be driving to the wreck. And of course, nobody can drive through the same track. So everybody's driving down his wheat, and he's getting all anxious about, they're ruining his crop. And that's what I was thinking as the airplane is I'm sure is going into the cornfield. Then I remember that there was a trim control on the airplane we'd taken off in F-86. That was a double acting, the little button for the override. And lo and behold, the little bit of slab that was still on the airplane, moved. And it slowly, the nose started coming up and missed the cornfield by a couple hundred feet. Went back up and the airplane was sitting. It was at idle. I put the gear down, and it's driving around with the gear down pretty good. And you can aileron it, but you can't do anything else with it. And so, and I'm coming up on the thinking I can go land this thing. So I called the tower and said, "Hey, there's 39 Juliet Romeo for have an emergency, south of the field here for landing," and had a problem, flight control problem, and then JR gets on the frequency, and then this is 39 Juliet Romeo bailing out on the 5 miles west, and the tower comes back and said, "Who's bailing out and who's flying?"
Oh, looks like Skip dropped off. We're coming up towards the end. He may come back on in, and the internet connection may be a little bit slow from where he was. So I don't know if you guys are hearing what I heard, but he was kind of dropping in and out. But this is what I'm trying to get with everybody. These gems in aviation, these aviators in aviation, and Skip may dial back in, and I'll bring him back in. But these are the living legends, right? These are the people that we remember the air races from, the people like Skip Holm and others, but today is Skip's day. So if he comes back in, great. Technology as it is, we as aviators will press on. I appreciate all the comments, and I tried to get to as many of them as I could. But like I said, we, just kind of what it is. So thanks everybody for hauling in. I'll give it a little bit here. So what are your thoughts? Ladies and gentlemen, we've got the new chapter of air racing coming up, and it's, 2025 is what we're looking for. We're really hoping to see out there the Unlimiteds come back, because those are the aircraft that we all remember. I love the jet class. I love the sport class, the biplanes, all that stuff. T6. I don't want to leave anybody out, even Formula One. And here it looks like Skip's coming back in. Let me try to bring him on here. Anyway, it looks like he's still loading. I'm going to bring it up. Here you go, Skip. Biplanes, all that stuff. T6. I don't want to leave anybody out, even Formula One. But here it looks like Skip's coming back in. Let me try to bring him on here. Anyway, it looks like he's still loading. I'm going to bring it up. Here you go, Skip.
Hey, how do you hear? Yeah.
I'm here.
The same thing happens in airplanes. Suddenly you look around, you're not.
Yeah, it's probably, it's all this modern technology of our internet connections. If they don't sync up and if the stars don't align, but, Skip,
Yeah.
coming back, what was your favorite winning trophy? So at the Reno Air Races, what was the best memory you have of the Reno Air Races?
Oh, that would have to be the Thompson because that thing lives by itself, and there's a lot of really unique people that have won that trophy in the past, and also it's a pilot one, it's not an airplane one because a lot of the trophies normally are airplane trophies, and it was fun doing it, and it was unusual because we never told Terry that we're going to go out and run a race. And he's the owner, and you'd hope that he would know you're going to run the airplane at full power, for 100 miles, times 6. So, um, and that was, so not only do you fly the airplane when you get back on the ground, you got to explain why you flew it like you did. Why didn't you pull the power back? And I think that particular race is a good for the people watching, because no matter if you're watching it from a video or watching it from the grandstand or anywhere, the idea that you have two airplanes that are starting a race and they're both going after the 500, and there's only one, which is the Bearcat, that's supposed to know it. Nobody else knew that the Thompson was up for grabs, which is ironic when your management is supposed to be in favor of everybody. But Didi, my wife, was the one that listening to these guys and overheard them say that the Thompson was being given that year for somebody going 500, which was the Bearcat. And I also knew the Bearcat would go 500 because I've flown that thing twice now after the race. And just to explain to the owner why it didn't win. And usually it's something that could be fixed easily because the Bear can easily go 500. But anyway, this particular day did not. And that's the exciting part, because when you watch both airplanes, the Bear's in the lead and then Dago, and you can see they're both trying to do something, and it looks like Dago cannot pass the Bear, and really that's what it was all the way around. I was trying to get ahead of him, and there was no way of doing it. And then when we came across right in front of the people, Dago just pulls out and passes that thing, and it looked like it was just an easy deal, to move one airplane ahead of the other one. But people ask, how did you do that? How did you pass the Bear right in front of the crowd? And I said, well, I used that big hole in the ground that's just off of the runway. You can dive through the hole and gain about 3 more knots, and that's all it took.
Well, it's Trudy asks, what
It's
about the tall jackrabbits in Reno? What about that one?
What?
My sister Trudy.
Oh. Yeah. Jackrabbits, yeah. Yeah, she was just talking about I hit a jackrabbit one time, and this was a special breed of rabbit because they could jump really high. She wants one in her backyard.
Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Well, Skip, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. What I'd like, I would love to come out, and when your book is ready for its release, I'd love to meet you somewhere, do a live interview, promote your book. I think what you're doing is fantastic. I am blessed and honored to speak to somebody of your caliber. Instead of just a hack aviator like me. you're one of the guys that I've always looked up to. So thank you so much, Skip, for coming on today on Air Racing, Past,
Yeah,
Present, and Future.
I heard most of what you said. Yeah, you were breaking out there.
We're just a little bit Nordo. That's
But
all. We can deal
I
with
understood
that.
that you were going to give me. No, I'm sure I didn't hear that.
Okay. Well, yeah, we're just having a technical glitch, I think, with our internet. But what I'd like to do is, again, thank you, Skip, and let's talk offline. I'd love to talk to you further about your book.
Okay, good.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Again, this is David Costa. I am the Renegade Aviator. See ya.
I think we're